joining me. I'm delighted, as always, on a Monday to be joined by commentator Sam Armstrong. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Do you reckon you'd survive under the banter police?
For about 5 minutes.
I mean, genuinely. I mean, I'm thinking, by the time I've got out the lift, before I've walked to my desk, I reckon I could have been sacked 8 times. Easy.
On my way in on a Monday, I have to walk past your desk before I get to everyone else. We normally start the conversation about the madness in the news at 15 to 20 paces, so the spies won't have to listen in hard.
Yeah. Sam, what do you think about this? Well, actually, we're going to be talking to someone who definitely wouldn't pass muster a little bit later in the show. His name's Montgomery Tums. You may have seen on social media, he was arrested. It took 11 police. He wasn't resisting arrest, he was just standing there peacefully wearing a sign, a billboard. On his billboard, it said, it was a picture of the trans flag, not the pride flag, the specific turquoise, white and pink trans flag, and he put here next to it equals mental illness. He was arrested by the police for this offensive sign. I'm pretty sure that sign is a statement of fact. Get the handcuffs, but also protected speech in this country. So we'll be talking to him. We'll be live in the studio, I'm delighted to say. Let's talk about, so much to talk about today, but let's start with the 20th anniversary of 7/7. 52 people killed, 800. People often forget about the 800 injured, many of them very severely, losing limbs and in a terrible, devastating impact on their lives. In the worst ever terror attack on UK soil, obviously beside Lockerbie, which took place obviously bombing over UK soil, but those of us who lived in London and still do at the time, really just devastating. I'm sure, like many people like me, knew people in London. I remember my husband used to get buses around that area where we had 3 explosions and tube stations in tube lines, and we also had the bus, a double-decker bus that was that the bomb exploded on there. And I remember not being able to reach my husband for about 3 hours, and thinking he was very likely to have been on that bus or nearabouts, and being as worried as I'm sure so many millions of other people were as well. It was an extraordinary day. There's an anniversary service today, and the King has sent a message to the nation, calling on the nation to remember the extraordinary courage and compassion in the face of the horror, and talking about the spirit of unity. I can vividly remember walking from Westminster home that night, because of course there was no public transport at that point, and walking along Pall Mall. It was completely eerie because everyone was just walking, just thousands of people walking, not a sound, everyone just walking. And I remember getting on the tube the next day and everyone looking around and giving each other, here we go, we're going on again. Should we, though, spend less time remembering these things and more time acting to prevent future attacks?
Well, I think there's a real question as to what it is that we're remembering. And so many of our politicians, and the King, I think, has to fit into this, but our politicians have other responsibilities, are all there to remember the tragedy and the spirit of coming togetherness and all of this that has been said. But let's be very clear about what we do need to remember. We need to remember that these attacks were launched by 4 men who lived in this country, second-generation immigrants.
Born in this country.
Who had been radicalised in a British bookshop, as it was called, but an Islamic centre, basically, and came to hate the very idea of this country. Those ideas that they held are, regrettably, held by, according to MI5, thousands upon thousands of people in this country. And that threat from Islamic terrorism remains today by a country mile the single biggest threat to the security of this country.
Yeah, stop going on about the far right.
Let's be very clear. Over 90% of people on the MI5 watch list are Islamic terrorists. Yeah. The vast majority of plots that are stopped, Islamic terrorists.
More than 40 have been stopped in the last... But not just some bloke sitting on the internet. We're talking about 40 serious plots to maim and kill. We've seen many more since. We had London Bridge attack. I can see, where it happened out the window here. We had the Westminster Bridge attack, the Manchester Arena attack, children as young as 7 killed in that. Little girls having fun, deliberately targeted. This is very real. We've seen it. We see it across Europe as well. When people talk about, don't look back in anger. Yeah. I'm angry. I'm still angry. I'm still angry that anyone lost their life or lost a limb. This was a point when police and security services kind of kind of had to get their act together to realise how serious that threat was. Seems to me, though, that politicians have not. And instead, what we thought was a great idea was let's import lots more people from countries where these views are rife, and let's not vet anybody. Let's just let people in, and then let's just see what happens. I don't think, going out on a limb here, it's worked out too well.
Look, the reality is far too many of Britain's migrant community hold views of hostility towards our country. They do not like.
But let's not set the net so wide. We're talking about Muslims. We're talking about a minority of Muslims, the vast majority, not the minority of Muslims, but a very sizable minority of Muslims in this country hold views which are completely antithetical to British values and want to change everything about this country and hate this country. We need to accept that. I don't understand, though, why those people are still in the country. That's the bit I don't understand.
Well, Julia, we cannot get anybody out of this country. We cannot get child rapists out of this country. There are more than 50 convicted terrorists who have been released from prison at the end of their sentence, who have not been deported, having raised human rights challenges to their deportation. These are people who are convicted of terrorist plots, terrorist acts, terrorist attacks in some cases, and we can't get them out of our country.
And this thing, people often say, this isn't the day to talk about it. Well, it was too soon for the first 20 years, was it? I remember even just after the Manchester Arena attack, literally the next day, saying, can we stop having vigils? Can we stop laying flowers and lighting candles and do something to prevent the next 7-year-old girl being blown up because she wants to go to a Ariana Grande concert? I mean, that's the reality to me, and I really think we are in a different territory now where people have just said, yeah, enough is enough. And we see these terrorists, lone wolf actors, who are virtually impossible to stop, as we've discovered. Your Axel Rudicabanas, your lone wolf attackers who just drive a car into people, putting some barriers up on a bridge. Great. Well, they'll go to the next bridge then. That's what they do. It does seem to me that,
But let's be clear. I mean, they've just put in a massive new barrier around the House of Lords, around the Houses of Parliament. It's the most hideous and ugly thing on earth. But that ugliness, to me, represents something, which is that we have had to fortify our entire country. We have had to change the way that we live. We've had to, every time you go through an airport, is a very real reminder that each of us, every single person in this country, is making great sacrifices in order to deal with the fact that we have a population within this country that, as we have said, actively hate us and are prepared to transform that hate into violence perpetrated against any representative.
We're not supposed to say
country.
quite a bit out loud. But we just did, because that's the point of this station. So, if you want to call in and have your thoughts on this, I would very much appreciate them. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, because, again, I just think lighting candles and having remembrance services doesn't really pass muster for an awful lot of us anymore. Look, I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about wealth tax, and I would like people to get in touch on that as well, because Labour, we are told, is willing to explore bringing in a new wealth tax on multi-millionaires to help pay for, well, let's face it, the rise in welfare costs, because that is the ballooning, exploding costs in our society. This is what Lord Neil Kinnock had to say, former Labour leader, paved the way really for Tony Blair's victory back in 1997. But he says that Labour is willing to explore this. Now, there's a lot said that actually Keir Starmer's government is not looking at this, but we know that all the trade unions are very much in support of this. 5 trade unions, the Unison Union, USDOR, the Fire Brigades Union, NASUWT, Teaching Union, and Unite. I mean, these are some of the big unions, the paymasters of the party and of many MPs, and particularly, of course, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. They think, wealth tax is the answer. What's your reaction to that? I'd love to know. I mean, let's face it, I think most of us probably not directly impacted by that, but is it the answer? Multimillionaires paying for the rise in welfare costs. What's your reaction? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. And of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1 standard network rate message. One of the numbers thrown around by Neil Kinnock was if the top 1%, Pete, not top 1%, people worth more than 10 million quid in assets, he said you could raise another £10 billion a year for the Treasury by a 2%, trying not to sneeze while I'm joking, sorry, a 2% tax on their assets. Apologies. The latest summer cold, £200,000 a year that would raise, but it would be every year, and it assumes, of course, those assets are realisable. I suppose if it's stocks and shares, yes, but then you've got a load of people presumably selling off their stocks and shares. But we're already losing millionaires at a ridiculous and very alarming rate, are we not, in this country? Is a wealth tax the answer?
Look, there are two economic concepts which sound quite attractive but fail each and every time: rent controls and wealth taxes. I'm not the biggest Thatcherite on earth, but these two ideas have been tried time and time again, and every time they come in, they have exactly the opposite effect for what you would like to see. The UK has already lost 16,500 millionaires in the last year. So that's people who are millionaires, 16,500 of them have fled the UK.
The trade union leaders and will go, well, good riddance to them.
Well, good riddance to them, but Julia, every time one of them leave, so do all of the taxes they pay, so do all of the contributions they make to this country, and the rest of us get left a little bit poorer.
Yeah.
If you want to know why it feels like we can't go on holiday as much, if you want to know why it felt like 20 years ago you could have a BMW on the drive and now you have a Honda or something else like that, the massive economic stagnation that has followed the business community, the global business community, fleeing these shores, going to the likes of Dubai, going to even Portugal or Italy that are welcoming them in, is the single biggest factor. Why?
Because this thing, almost 30% of all tax in this country is paid by the top 1%. Now, top 1%, I've got to be honest with you, it's not as rich as you'd think. Certainly by 2022, it's probably gone up more, being worth over, just a good bit over 3 million. It's probably gone up quite a lot since, because people have been making a lot of money on their assets. And there is an element where, people's wages have stagnated, but people making money from shares, stocks and shares, that has gone up. Bearing in mind, if you've got a pension of any sort, you're also helping, you're making money from that. But I mean, and I know that since austerity, taxes on the rich have gone up.
Yep.
They already pay a lot of tax, and they are paying more tax than they used to pay.
Yep.
45 pence in the pound top rate of tax. But this argument is about assets. So people have got assets and they're not being taxed. What's the argument on that?
Well, so these are things that people have. So it might be their stocks and shares. It might be their pension.
Their yacht.
It might also be their house.
Yeah.
It might be their back garden. And presumably, the taxman isn't going to go and accept your own valuation of what things worth.
40 pence.
So are we going to see HMRC inspectors coming round to see how much silver cutlery you have in the drawers?
The drones. Well, I suppose also it depends. Like, someone could just earn a load of money. They can spend it all, just whatever they want. Wine, women and song. They could waste the rest.
Yeah.
As George Best said. Was it George Best? But they... but if they decide to invest and they do well and they save for their future and for their children and their grandchildren and all of that, but improve their home, etc., then they will be facing this asset tax.
And of course, this is money that they have already paid taxes on.
That's the key for a lot of people.
This is the government coming back to have a second bite of the cherry. And look, another factor, it won't be as many as the inheritance tax changes, but for farmers in the southeast of England, if it's going to be based on the potential value, if you turned your farm into a load of housing estates, are we going to see farmers hit with a £200,000 a year additional tax on top of it?
And finding that money at that time again, and that's things like the tax on property, and people purchase you purchase a home, or when you sell a home, people have kind of got that money. I've always thought that tax should be paid by the person selling the home, not the person buying it anyway. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because you may agree with the trade unions and Neil Kinnock. Oh, the rich aren't taxed enough. The rich have got richer, but they are paying more tax as a result, and their rates of tax have gone up. I'm kind of the view, the 45% tax, and you've got, national insurance on top of that for a large portion of it. I'm thinking that's a reasonable level of tax. I mean, I would say too much level of tax. I think once you're going over taking more than 50% of someone's income, which you do for certain of those income brackets, that seems to me to be wrong. That taking more than half of what someone does, and we've already seen, haven't we, with doctors in the NHS when they've got those pension pots, that actually you think, oh, well, people aren't going to give up working, they're still earning, but they go, no, it's not worth my while because I'm having so much of it taken away. I can't put it in my pension pot. What's the point? And people stop earning, they stop working, they stop paying tax, but also they stop running business. They don't set up the next business. They don't set up, and as we know, they leave the country. When Francois Hollande came into France, the president then, something like a 70% tax. Literally, people were packed up at the airport and they left. That's what happens. We know that's what happens because it happens every time a country does it.
And of course, in this case, we're not actually talking about just people, we're talking about assets. So if you own a bunch of British companies, what is to stop you tomorrow selling them, moving them overseas, buying up different companies, and you might want to have a factory in Middlesbrough making something, but under this facility that you're going to get taxed 2% of the total value of that that property every year. So why not set up the business in Dubai? Why not set up the business in the Far East?
Or probably somewhere like Ireland, which would probably be the country that would most move to try and benefit from that. Can I also talk about, allied to that, again, is the fact that we've got massive benefits bill, we've got disability benefits, sickness benefits. They have ballooned to a ridiculous level where we're having mobility cars given out to people who've got tennis elbow, for goodness sake. Absolute madness. But we've also got now, we're facing the Prime Minister facing another revolt after he basically gave in completely, absolutely just totally gave up completely over that welfare pretend tiny reform over special educational needs. Now, this is a SENDS, a special education needs and disabilities, and it's a system of schools, and it's a nightmare for parents who've got a child with genuine disability. It really is. But we have seen an explosion, yet again, in recent years, of children claiming this for ADHD, autism, and the like. Now, do we suddenly have an explosion of children getting this? Is it just that the system has become more simple, more easy, or some people playing the system are, frankly, in a lot of cases, there are kids who absolutely have those problems and absolutely need help. Or we have a parenting fail on a grand scale, which is what I think a lot of this is, I'm afraid, in terms of just the kind of background and the kind of routine you impose in your family life. But we're looking at £12 billion a year cost for this. This is off the scale. This is unsustainable.
I'm going to lose some friends here, but I've spoken to a lot of teachers, and every single primary school teacher I meet tells me that they have half a dozen, if not more, kids in their class all of a sudden coming in with ADHD diagnosis. Let me be quite clear. If your little Eddie goes into class, cannot concentrate, pulls the hair of the girl in front of him, throws things around, kicks off when his teacher asks him to read and write and do his basic stuff, the chances are it is not due to a medical condition. It is due to the fact that you sit there at home with him on his screens all day long with flashing lights and all the rest of it coming along. It is due to the fact that you feed him sugar and sweets and everything you are told not to. And it is due to the fact that he isn't getting enough exercise. You aren't putting him down to bed at a time. Do your job as a parent.
Thank you.
Do not go to the government, demand that he is certified with a medical condition that he doesn't have, in many cases have him medicated, which is terrible for kids. Do the basics of parenting, parent him in precisely the way that you were brought up, that children for generations in this country have been brought up, and don't burden us with the cost, and don't abuse your kid by telling him he's got a medical condition when in actual fact he's just brought up.
He's just got poor parents, you rubbish parents, you're not being... But also the crucial thing, and again, it's the same with disability benefits, if we're giving help to everybody, we're not targeting the help on the children who genuinely do need that help and really do have those issues.